I am Kabbani, and this is the Lighthouse for today's viewers. Welcome to our show. We hear about the Arab Spring, and we heard already about it for a long, long time. It started on around February this year, and it's still going and going. It became the fall of the year, not just the spring of the Arab world. We still have story after story, country after country fall apart with the war inside that country over this. Lately, we have Syria, and the longest story with the Arab Spring, and the bloodiest, maybe, story in the middle of that expression, supposedly for better tomorrow, hopefully for better tomorrow, but let's find out what's going on in Syria after these long months. Our guests today from Syria, let's introduce them to you, then we will start talking about the subject. Welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Will you please introduce yourself to our viewers?
I'm Mohammad Kabbesh. It's really nice, Nahid, to be with you again in the show. It was nice to host us a year ago, and unfortunately we still come to you again, and the revolution in Syria is still ongoing. The Assad regime has not been removed yet. I have lived in the United States since 1997. I lived in Sacramento for the last 2 years. I feel blessed to be able to live in America without fear of the security services. And it's an opportunity for us to come tell your viewers about what the people of Syria want and what they are living through every day.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having us. My name is Zakiuam Quwatli. I'm from Syria, from the city of Homs. Living here in the United States for about 7 years now, and I came here today to give our story about what's going on in Syria, and also from a personal standpoint as well.
Thank you for coming. Really, we need this story because we are short of news about Syria. We did make other shows about Egypt and Tunisia and Iraq and other side of the world, but Syria still, we need more and more to let our viewers know exactly what's going on. So what things have to be changed in Syria from that point to this point?
So Syria has, had become a tragedy. If I summarize in one point, the people of Syria, just like the people of Tunisia and people in Libya and Egypt and Yemen, came up in the Arab Spring. They've seen their brethren in other Arab countries achieve things that people never heard they can achieve, getting rid of dictatorships that have been established for, for tens of years, 20 and 30 and 40 years. And unfortunately, the pathway of the Syrian people towards their freedom have been obstructed because of intervention and international calculations where countries have favored their own interests at the expense of their own principles, even the principle these countries preach. So the revolution started in Syria in March 15, 2011, very short after the success of the Egyptian revolution. With all the negatives we may see in other Arab Spring countries that had not completely finished their revolution phase and still in the building phase of a civil society, the Syrian people still see it as a paradise comparing to the oppression they live in. We spoke a year ago about how the revolution was going on. Since then, I feel that the three things are worth shedding light on. First, how the things inside Syria have changed over the last year, how the international community response have changed over the last year, and what things can be done so we can bring a closure to this ongoing tragedy in Syria. And may I proceed to the first section?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, we all heard about how the Syrian revolution started. And it's not true that the Syrians are unique among the other nations in the Arab countries and North Africa and the Middle East. They're just people who are lounging for their own liberties. The new media have introduced them to the outside world, and they want to live like humans. So just like the Tunisians, the Egyptians, and the Libyans, they started a revolution. It's a peaceful revolution, marked a year ago with peaceful sit-ins, with candlelight vigils, and with huge marches of large number of protesters, really calling for abandoning the military rule that they've been going on for 42 years, and for the chance to elect their officials for the first time after 42 years. What has been unusual is the response of the regime to these peaceful demands and peaceful demonstrations. The regime insisted the first day they were not going to back off or bargain the way the Tunisian, Egyptian, or the Yemeni dictatorships have done. They've chosen to take the path of Gaddafi in Libya and choose bloodshed. They try to be smarter in the evil they're doing by stroking fears in the international community and among Syrians of sectarianism, and trying really to mix the papers and confuse people about what the revolution is. So moving to the first point, in Syria since a year ago, there's a few things you can see that has changed. First, the regime is more and more clearly not behaving like a government or a state, it's behaving like a militia. We can see clearly that over the last year of the revolution, the regime have abandoned all functions of the government, so there is no schools run by the government. Not only the cities and the streets that are where the demonstrations happen that have been cut off from electricity, water supply, and food, it's become a routine practice of the regime to attack civilians who are lining up to get bread. The stable for that in Syria. People now expect whenever they're standing in line waiting for their daily bread, in the few bakeries that are still functioning, they know they are a target for the regime warplanes or artillery for bombardment, and so many people have lost their lives through this. The regime, just a few days ago, it surfaced that the regime have actually kidnapped the U.S. journalist Austin Tice, and they're showing him in a YouTube video in a really cheap attempt to intimidate the administration, or I really don't know what they're thinking or what they hope to achieve of that, but he's been shown in a YouTube video being blindfolded and led on foot in a desert area.
What they will accomplish from that?
I really think that it's a regime that knows it's falling. They're desperate. And I think they have chosen the path of cruelty. And if we think about all these atrocities and the crimes, they're not the mistakes. They're calculated for the purpose of terrorizing people, both in Syria and outside Syria, and intimidating people.
What kind of role America play in Syria?
So, unfortunately, the United States role had been described as a lack of leading from behind. So, known U.S. commentators have said that if the administration was to choose to lead from behind, that would be good. We've seen just today that the regime forces have shelled a town inside Turkey, killing 5 Turkish citizens, including a child. And quite unfortunately, the repeated response that we have seen from NATO, which Turkey is a member of, is to the condemnation. This has not been the first attack, and believe me, this is not a mistake, it's a calibrated attack.
Absolutely, it's not a joke also.
Absolutely. I mean, we know now, months and months after the Syrian regime downed a Turkish jet, that this was not a mistake, and that the pilots were not killed in the incident, that the regime have captured them alive and killed them to try to intimidate the Turks. It's purpose to convince the outside revolution that the Assad regime do have functioning and strong air defenses to fend off any idea of intervention to stop the massacre in Syria.
But in Syria, they are fighting each other from city to city. They destroy their own country through two chapters of Islam or something inside Syria. What about America to be involved?
Well, the United States, everybody knows that, I think it's obvious by now, that the reason why the aspirations of the Syrian people have not been achieved now is not because of lack of trying. It's because of all these countries in the region and in the world that do have interests. And, most of them have interests with the Assad regime. They have interests that the Syrian people do not achieve their aspirations. So we start with the Iranian government, which does have an interest in diverting the frustrations of its population over the collapsing economy into an outside battle. They do have an interest of maintaining a stronghold so they can create trouble for the United States. We do know that there are terrorist groups that do have interest into sneaking into these countries that become unstable and lawless and starting attack there against the United States interests, just like what happened in Libya. So when you say that two groups of Syrians are killing each other and destroying cities, I would respectfully disagree with you, saying that this is actually, we know now that there are high-ranking leadership and the Hezbollah were being killed in Syria because more and more the desperate regime is relying on more help from Iranian and Hezbollah forces to continue to suppress the population.
Wow. So this is a huge story. Let's find out after the break.
Thank you.
You're watching The Lighthouse for today's viewers, brought to you by oneworldforyou.org.
So Mr. Mohammad gave us an idea about what's going on in Syria in general. Let's talk about a city of Homs. It has been in the news for a long time and things happen in it. Let's ask Mr. Zakiuam about it. Will you please give us an idea about Homs city,
So,
what's going on in it?
as you know, Homs is the third largest city in Syria. It's in the west side of Syria. It's about 1 million population. The revolution, as you know, the first spark revolution in Daraa, a southern city, but shortly after Homs ignited and was called the capital of the Syrian revolution. The situation in Homs now is very difficult. It's a city under siege, mostly, and about 80% of the city has been destroyed by artillery and shelling. Maybe more, and one neighborhood in Homs, a relatively new neighborhood, most of population of Homs has fled to that neighborhood, and now they're in schools, no homes, all fled to those, and the situation is very difficult because you have now an area which is heavily populated. It's very dense, and all the problems that comes with that, problems with providing food for those huge number of people who once had a home, had a business, were making money, and now they lost their businesses, they lost their houses, and they're begging for a room or two so they can find shelter, and then they're out of money because whatever they saved, it's gone now. So now they're looking at relatives in other countries to give them money at the time that they were making money. So, and moving around in city in homes is very difficult and dangerous. It can cost you your life. So you have to know which street to pass, which
Is
street
it
not.
under the government
Yes.
military?
So, yes. So for the most part, the populated parts of the city is under the government control. The parts that are not populated because
So not
because
fully
simply-
control. With
no,
the
because
government.
simply you cannot live there anymore because it's almost destroyed, and the Free Syrian Army they control this area, which is being shelled almost every day. So in general, I can say the city of Homs is under control of the Syrian forces, especially the populated parts of the city.
What about the medical help? Is it available or not?
Medical help that's a very big problem because medical supplies are very scarce, and at best is very, very primitive. Doctors are under they're under danger all the time when you try to help wound people or even regular patients. That's a very dangerous job. So it's a very dire situation even from the medical standpoint, because you cannot go to. There are hospitals that under the government control, and you cannot go there. And the other choice is either you die in your home or in the makeshift hospitals, which are very primitive and it cannot keep up with the medical need.
And the roads are safe to move from area to another?
If you find a road that's still, you can call it a road, because most of the roads are like literally destroyed, not only because of the shells, but long before, because just of the tanks. No, it's not safe. So you have to know where you go in Homs. Otherwise, with snipers, the snipers will get you. So it's
a shame to see our people killing each other and their government killing them.
Yeah.
Not an enemy from outside.
That's
This
the
is
night.
unbelievable.
It's
situation.
unbelievable. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. It's a nightmare.
So it's really hard to believe that what happened in that area. What about Aleppo? It was in the news for a long time and now still under attack. And,
So Aleppo is the second city in Syria, but it's the largest among in terms of population, and it's the economic hub of Syria, where a lot of the industry and agriculture center. The people in Aleppo had tried to take back their city from the Assad regime forces. And unfortunately, we have a situation here where the people on one side, but the weapons and the arms are on the other side. So you have the Assad regime not able to dominate the city, but they're able to destroy it. And they're able to level off the neighborhoods that where the population have been successful in pushing the security forces outside. And what the Assad forces do is they are on the outskirts. They've resorted to constant shelling by air and by artillery. They went even as low as to target specifically the water supply of the city, cutting the water supply of the city. Just the other day, NPR aired a piece about a makeshift hospital or a field hospital just north of Aleppo where the wounded are being evacuated to. And just to give you an idea about the behavior of this regime, the same day that this piece was aired, that field hospital was targeted with artillery shells to destroy the hospital. So it's been a systematic policy of the regime to target medical points, medical health facilities. There have been documented several cases of physicians, volunteer ambulance crews, people who help the wounded, who've been not only killed, but actually they're burned to scare others from helping any wounded people.
Do you have any pictures?
Unfortunately, I don't have pictures. The slides I have here are for points for me to remember. I promise, hopefully, to email and send, different places when you speak. Some people object to pictures and videos, they consider them offensive or could be not for the faint of the heart.
Will you please find me some pictures
I'll be
give
more
it,
than happy.
To the viewers, at least to put things together?
I'll be more than happy
Okay,
to
I'll add it to
send
the
this. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. So now, what is the situation in Damascus too?
So Damascus, the situation that had been the most quiet city so far. The regime, as usual, and it being the pattern everywhere, is losing grip. Yesterday there was a shootout in the one of the most important squares, Saht al-Abbasiyin, in Damascus. It's been very well known, and your viewers are probably aware that the insiders in the regime security forces have been launching attacks on the headquarters and of the military command of the Assad forces inside Damascus. The opposition have been able to capture the suburbs, especially the southern suburbs of Damascus, mainly the areas where the roads and the alleys are so narrow that tanks and heavy weaponry cannot get inside, giving the people of these areas the chance to resist the Assad forces. And Assad have just, in other cities, have resorted to shelling these areas from the Mount Qasiyun, which overlooks the capital. The Assad forces continue to block roads every time they have a scare, and we continue to see the regime figures that are prominent, who used to live in Damascus, trying to manage to smuggle their fortunes that have made over the years and flee themselves and smuggle their families outside the country.
We start to see Syrian coming to America. Is it the situation like Iraq now as a refugee, or not started yet?
So the situation for the refugees, I would submit, is worse than it was in Iraq. And one day of violence in Syria had been worse than the peak of violence of Iraq. This is a systematic violence by armed forces of what used to be a government against the people. Is intended to intimidate and kill the maximum number of people. Unfortunately, the Syrian refugees now are not even being allowed to cross into safety, in violation of the international laws. So we have the Iraqi government claiming it cannot accommodate more than a certain number of refugees a day, so these people will have to stay in the desert. We have the Turkish government saying it's overwhelmed with refugees, so the people are stuck literally on the border crossings, waiting for their chance to cross into refugees. We have the Jordanian government also claiming that it's overwhelmed. We have documented cases about the appalling conditions for the Syrian refugees in Jordan and Lebanon. And some people are making it into this safety in the United States or Europe, but it's very difficult. Just the other day, more than 60 Syrian refugees died in a boat that capsized off the Turkish coast trying to reach the shores of Europe.
So, American embassy in Syria is closed.
Absolutely.
And people have to have visa to come to America.
Absolutely.
And the refugee from Iraq took them years in Jordan or Syria or whatever until they get tired, until they get to America.
Absolutely.
Do you think Syrian will be jumping from Syria to America immediately?
I think eventually some Syrians will manage to arrive in the United States. And I think the ideal situation is that the catastrophe or the tragedy in Syria will be stopped. So this flow of refugees out of this 23 million population would stop, and people would not need to run into safety in other countries.
If there is better situation in Syria.
Well, that's what we're trying for, right? And that's what I think is quite achievable. It's just if there is real intentions and will to solve the problem can be solved.
But for now, it's still dangerous. And
it's still dangerous and deteriorating every day.
Try to run away.
Absolutely. I mean, everyone, including my family, are trying to find safety. So they're trying to leave that country as quickly as possible. if the if the regime heads and figures are smuggling their families and children out of the country, so ordinary people are also trying to run for safety. They may not have the means, they're not as well connected, but they still want to cross into safety.
It's really difficult. It's really hard to believe that a human being does that things to other human,
Right.
brothers and sisters.
Right.
They are in the same country, from the same families,
Right.
and killing each other, to see them, to watch them on the news, it's really unbelievable human situation.
Absolutely.
And the government, instead of taking care of their people, they are the people against their.
They're killing people. And unfortunately,
I
this is
cannot really.
wrap your
It's
mind
not
around it.
easy to put it together to tell my viewers how it goes. But let's find out after the break. Really, it struggled me. So we'll find out after the break.
oneworldforyou.org, promoting cultural understanding through the media.
So as we talk about the situation in Syria, it's really difficult, and it's bloody, and it's ugly. But Syria itself will not do all the mess without hands from outside, I believe. And international interest should be going through what is the situation in Syria. Let's find out what is the relationship with international world with Syria. So how do you think they can deal with it as NATO or international?
So the international situation as it relates to Syria is divided into a few things. You have the countries that are in the immediate vicinity of Syria.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see that the Arab Spring countries where the populations have taken control of their destiny, are squarely with the Syrian people.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, some of their support have not materialized beyond the nice words, but they're squarely with the people. Over the last year, you have seen that there is more and more admitted and direct aid from Iran and Hezbollah to the regime. Just the other day, it being aired that actually Iranian government, in the middle of a shocking economic situation back home, had given Assad regime $10 billion to prop it up. You can counter that with the claims that the United States government makes every time there is a flashing news of a new massacre, of giving non-lethal aid to the Syrian opposition, which they have promised up to $45 million. And with the New York Times and the Washington Post stories again and again saying, this, according to the administration officials, this promised aid have not been fulfilled and people have not seen it. So this gives you the scale that what happened. And unfortunately, this has been a pattern even with the attacks of neighboring countries, with the known involvement of Assad in terrorism, with the public threat of terrorist acts against the United States if the regime falls, and with the known agents of the Syrian regime here in the United States. You see the passive attitude of the U.S. government beyond the word of encouragement that the Syrian people heard. Syrian people inside are now always, sadly joking about the repeated assurances that the Assad regime received from NATO and the U.S. government about their never going to be intention for any action against the Assad regime. Of course, this is not the message that would encourage Assad to stop his crimes. If the Assad regime is assured that there are going to be no consequences, then all the words pleading with the Assad regime to stop the crimes are empty because they're not backed by action.
So Assad got some big money as help
Absolutely.
from outside. For what reason?
So it is very well known that the Iranian regime is intended on continuing to enrich uranium, and that has led to a big show-off with the United States and the West and the international community. So having the ability to control another country in the Middle East with a very strategic location like Syria is a big asset for Iran. Unfortunately, Iranian government have understood that the fight with the United States among four dominance of ideas and hearts of minds starts in Syria, but the United States government continues to ignore that effort. It continues to ignore that it is the Iranian revolutionary forces that are fighting in Syria, and this is a proxy war against the interests of the United States. A lot of people feel that this is just a election year politics that have an interest in calming things down until after the elections. Unfortunately, it may not be the best route for the United States government and the United States security.
Election year,
Politics.
money from the United States to Syria.
Election year politics dictates
It doesn't match.
that the United States would ignore the Iranian threats in Syria, the Iranian threats of closing the Straits of Hormuz oil passage until after elections. Because, it's very well known that the people here in the United States are tired of being in two wars.
Mm-hmm.
They are afraid of confrontation. Of course, the economy is barely recovering from a very steep recession. And so nobody have interest in hostility. Unfortunately, all the reasonable analysts know that there is very little chance that the Iranian regime would back off uranium enrichment just by sanctions alone. And it's a proxy war. It's a proxy war that Iran, Hezbollah, is launching against the United States' interests in the region. Because this is a big asset for them. Assad regime has been known to be a start for a lot of terrorist activities, had been on the United States Department of State list of state sponsors of terrorism for a long time, and any country that wants to create troubles for the United States do have interest in not allowing that regime to fall.
Okay, but still, I'm struggling to understand that, and maybe my viewers will not be easy to understand,
Mhm.
that Assad killing his people.
Absolutely.
Me as America will help, usually you help country fighting with other side, either for food or for medical or for kind of help inside that regime.
Mhm.
If the regime is killing the people, how can I help the regime giving money for just something about Iran? What about if I am, as a bad regime, used it against my people?
So actually, the United States aid is, as we started saying, the regime is no longer behaving like a regime. It's behaving like a gangs and militias.
Okay.
United States aid is intended to go to the Syrian people who are no longer served by the regime. So it's going to the opposition groups and specifically going for telecommunications, for water sanitation, for medical aid.
Mhm.
It's just I'm saying if you compare that with the amounts of money that the Iranian regime gives to the regime, being $10 billion, and the amount the United States promised, $45 million, you can see that there is a huge difference in the scale of aid. And you couple that with the reports in the US media of this aid that's been promised have not been fulfilled, you understand the difficulties that the Syrian people are undergoing.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Okay. So to balance the whole world in Syria, Iran and America and Syria as three players in this
Absolutely.
war at the end of the whole war with the Middle East.
So, it's not entirely true that the Syrian people are fighting each other. It's unfortunately is Russia, Hezbollah, Iran, and a host of other countries are trying to stand up literally for the progress of history, because some people tend to forget that history would not go back. People are now demanding their freedom. We're not going back to the Middle Ages. We're not going back to a presidency that can be inherited by son after father. We're not going to a same family rule for 42 years and ongoing. And but these regional powers do have interest in stopping this progress of the Syrian people, and that's what's leading to all this bloodshed.
Okay. Also, I don't hear with the story about Israel. Syria usually was the main wall between Israel and the Middle East.
Right.
So if Syria does that and fall apart, what about our relationship with Israel? Are we, as Americans, support Syria for this matter or not? What about this main issue not coming in the scene?
So I think this has been all the Israeli leaders have been very careful not to mention anything regarding Syria. A lot of people have suspicions that the lack of adequate coverage in the US media of the events of Syria could be related to these interests. I think Israel, as an ally to the United States, stands to lose eventually, because everybody have heard President Barack Obama very famously say that chemical weapons are a red line. Of course, a lot of people have interpreted that as saying to Assad, you can do everything else, but you cannot use chemical weapons. Now, Assad is in a more desperate situation. He's going to start ignoring red lines because he sees his government declining. And now, really, in the last few days, you had reports that Assad is moving chemical weapons. So all the countries in the region that had thought that the catastrophe inside Syria is not going to spill over, that's not true. As Assad gets more desperate, he's gonna have more and more interest in promoting an explosion in the Middle East and pulling everybody into the fight that he knows he's losing.
So moving the
chemical weapon, yes,
as Assad, for what reason? To show off or to use it against his people?
Of course,
he cannot use it against Israel for sure.
Why not?
Now?
I mean, nobody knows
is it
what's
the right time to open war for the whole world with chemical weapon also?
I really do not know.
Is it a smart move?
Well, let's read history. So nobody knows what's in the mind of Assad, right? He's a criminal. He's shown that he's more ruthless because all the world leaders have been calling on this person who supposedly was educated in Britain. He should understand democracy, not to be such a cruel criminal. He had proven to be more cruel than anybody believed, right? So nobody knows what is in Assad's mind. But if you look at history, you see that Saddam Hussein, when he really believed he was in trouble, right, he started attacking Israel. He started attacking Saudi Arabia with the Scud missiles. So what Assad does, when he's really desperate, when he's been allowed to commit massacres for this long period of time, nobody knows what's going to happen. And I don't think any sane person can believe that this tragedy will be contained within the Syrian borders. We've already seen it affecting Lebanon, affecting Turkey. There have already been clashes with the Jordanian army over attacks by Assad thugs on the refugees. I mean, I don't think it's going to stay contained. And I don't think Assad is going to save anybody from his criminality when he sees his regime crumbling down.
Nothing will be surprised if he is killing his people. I think he can throw away something here, something there. Too many things and hard to believe, hard to accept, so let's think about it. After the break, we'll talk about what we can do.
Absolutely.
So let's see what we can do after the break. So what I can say, as we heard, my viewers, it's unbelievable and unacceptable situation in Syria, mixed up with national and international. The whole Arab world together mixed up with the spring, supposedly. The flowers become bloody flowers in that spring. It become fall, rainy, winter time. I don't know what the rain will be. But what can be done to change this situation, to not be able to destroy all Arab world from our hands, Arab with Arab? Because the international things and things from outside doesn't show off that much. All what we see, Arab killing each other, Muslim killing each other in Syria. So let's find out with our guests. What do you think can be done?
I think Dr. Quwatli can start by describing what things can be done by the international community, what people of conscience here in the United States can demand of their elected officials, and what they themselves can do and the efforts to help their Syrian people.
So what we care most about actually as Syrians is just the humanitarian aid. I mean, people of Syria need a lot of help, and they're already exhausted after more than 18 months. So they need all the help that they can get, and that's not. This help cannot be provided by persons like sending some money here or these countries' efforts. The countries of the world can come up with some solution, at least to find some kind of shelter to the people of Syria, because now no shelter. You can get killed at any time. You can get a sniper bullet at any time. You can get shelled. So that situation is unacceptable, and it's been going on for 18 months. I'm not a strategic analyzer, but there should be some solution through the United Nations, preferably, for some kind of a safe area for Syrians. And even in this situation, that Syrians have been asking for this for a long time. Even if this happen, it'll serve only limited part of Syria. Other Syrians has to face their fate. So that's one thing. The other thing is just the world basically has been watching for now, and the reason is for many reasons, as Dr. Kabbesh said. The government of Syria had made strategic alliances with some countries who not necessarily have the best record of human rights, and that now is paying off for them. Syrian people has nobody made a license with no other countries, and depends heavily on the conscience of the world community, and we can see the consequences of that. So human aid, in my view, is the most pressing need at this time. And of course, whenever I meet with fellow Americans here, I tell them, just please spread the word, because they don't know a lot about what's going on in Syria, despite all what's going on. So we ask them just to spread the word to the people who you know, just to make the public here aware of what's going on. That might change the story.
That might be a good suggestion.
I think very simply, we need to recognize Assad for what he is. He's not a president of a country. He's a gangster. He's a gang leader. He's a criminal, and needs to be stopped. The world have watched for long the tragedies in Rwanda without intervening to stop, and that led to millions of people losing it. We are in the 21st century. The shipments that the United States government had been complaining about of Iranian arms going to Assad over Iraqi territory is a violation of UN Security Council resolutions. It does not need new UN Security Council resolutions, and complaining about it in the media is not the way for the government that leads the free world to do something about it. Second, $10 billion could easily be detected flowing to Assad. The Iranian government is already under international sanctions when it relates to monetary funding. We need to understand how were these allowed to flow to Assad regime, because this is not in the interest of the United States. Third, Assad needs to learn that there is consequences for shelling Turkish villages. Turkey is a NATO member, is an ally of the United States. And if Assad thinks he can get away with killing Syrians, and then can get away with killing Lebanese, and then can get away with killing Turks, soon we're going to be seeing the smoking gun. And Assad regime, just like Hassoun, the Islamic leader of the regime, have threatened with suicide attacks inside the United States and inside Europe. If Assad is not made to understand that there is consequences for these actions, these attacks are coming here, because everybody knows that Assad and all the terrorist organizations associated with it do have sleeper cells here. Fourth, the Syrian people are trying to start. Assad have lost control over 50% of the country, over a lot of cities. And the Syrian people are trying to build their life there. They're trying to build the structures for governance. They're trying to build structures for healthcare. They're trying to build structures for main provisions of services that a government would provide. You already have the startup of local governing councils that are elected by the people of each town, and these do select bigger councils for the locales and then the governorates or the local districts. So these new structures need the support of the international community. Syrians need people to support them. They need them to give them the means so they can defend themselves against Assad. Everybody kept talking about how the Syrians are divided. Every day we hear about different factions that are uniting. We hear about initiatives for groups to work with each other so they can achieve the common goal, even if there's still different groups. That's normal. And the United States government should work with the groups that do see the same vision and believe in open and pluralistic Syria, so that outside groups and terrorists like Al-Qaeda do not take advantage of a vacuum that can result and use that location as a launching pad against the United States and interests. We've seen what happened in Libya, and it's time to learn the lesson, not to repeat the mistakes again.
Wow, that's a heavy point. Thank you for that anyway.
Thank you.
And hopefully, things will ease up soon in Syria. Hopefully Assad will feel as a human being that he is a human being first, not a weapon.
Right.
And hopefully God will help Syrian people, because I feel sorry when I see immigrants from all over the Arab world, which they were in their countries, living happily and their own countries.
Right.
To see them in situations, need help everywhere around the world, it reminds me Palestinian Israel.
Exodus, unfortunately.
Palestine was the longest story in the history, but now we are opening subjects for other countries, which is hard to believe that America will accept all refugees to help them, while in the meantime we need our help for our country too.
Right.
So it will be a heavy load for us as American, and it will be easier for us as a human being and as human rights fighters to help the country inside itself, outside of our country. It's like Syria or Egypt or Tunisia or whatever. If we help the people to establish their life again in their country, it's easier than to come to us and carry that load on our shoulder in our country to establish their own life away from their country.
Absolutely. I think it's beyond believing in human rights and fixing other countries. The United States advances its interests in the world by having friendly countries. And Assad definitely for the last 42 years have been a staunch enemy of the United States interests. It's time to get him to where he belongs, outside, somewhere in the shameful history of the world. It is also known that any cost that you can think of or talk about is much less of a shock to the U.S. economy and U.S. interest than paying $100 for a gallon of oil. And that's exactly what the Iran have threatened by closing the Straits of Hormuz. This is a fight with Iran, nothing less than that.
Well, I believe because of the gallon of oil will be this much, it doesn't mean that we forget ourselves that we are human beings first. We are the leaders for the whole world second. And we have, not because it's election year, we forget ourselves, we forget our power to the world. We're supposed to stand up again as America and lead the world to peaceful situation with order if it needed. Anyway, thank you for coming.
Thank you
On
very
behalf
much.
of my viewers, I appreciate your coming and thank you for this information. And for you, my viewers, sorry for this heavy talk. And this is what we have, it's a fact. But for me, I look at the strength in the person as a human being. If we control the whole world with love and care and humanity, human side will be stronger than weapon, and we will be strong as much as we will be rich or heavy at the end of the day or the time. The person will be like this and go under the ground with nothing. There is a power above our power, and we have to believe in it, and we have to remember it. How can we sleep if we give that hardship to human being? In our America, we talk about animal rights. What about those human beings? I know you have a great heart, and I know you will see the immigrants, you will help, and we all here for help, but let God help us to think serious and to think as a human being and help our government to do something for humanity. I'll let you go. See you next time. Thank you for watching.